Imagine this. You're slicing into a massive, sun-warmed, perfectly crisp watermelon right from your very own backyard. You grew it, it's incredibly sweet, incredibly juicy, and honestly, it's easier than you think. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are taking all the guesswork out of gardening. We're going to break down the exact step-by-step science to growing those massive, intensely sweet watermelons from absolute scratch, even if you've literally never picked up a trowel before.
You know, a lot of aspiring gardeners think that getting the perfect watermelon requires some kind of magic green thumb, or maybe just pure luck. But actually, that's a total myth. The real secret? It really just comes down to a few highly calculated, proven methods that professional agricultural science has perfected over the years.
Because success here is absolutely not about just tossing some seeds in the dirt and hoping for the best. It's about mastering a few very specific environmental variables. We're talking precise timing, dialed-in soil temperature, and a completely counterintuitive watering trick right at the end of the ripening cycle. Seriously, this one irrigation technique is the literal deciding factor between a fruit that is mind-blowingly sweet and one that's just completely bland.
So, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll be covering the ideal planting time, getting your soil prepared, treating those seeds and seedlings, sowing techniques, and finally, that crucial irrigation strategy for super sweet fruits.
Okay, let's jump right into Section 1, Ideal Planting Time. And spoiler alert, it is all about temperature.
You have to remember, watermelons originally come from the really warm climates of Central and South America. They are incredibly sensitive to the cold, so rushing to plant them on some arbitrary date in early spring, that's a massive trap. There's a hard and fast agricultural rule you need to follow here. Your soil temperature, specifically at a 10-centimeter depth, absolutely must hit 14 to 15 degrees Celsius before you even think about sowing. If you plant earlier and that soil is too cold, the seeds will literally just sit there and rot, or your young sprouts will just die off. So waiting for that consistent soil warmth, that is absolutely your very first key to success.
And going beyond just planting day, for a full, successful vegetative cycle, your local climate needs to provide what's called a total sum active temperature of between 2,000 and 3,000 degrees. Now, I know that sounds intense, but it's really just a scientific way of measuring all the beneficial heat your plants are going to absorb over the entire summer. Basically, watermelons thrive when daytime temperatures sit happily between 25 and 30 degrees Celsius. They need all that cumulative heat to build those massive vines and ultimately to develop all those delicious natural sugars.
Moving right along to Section 2, Soil Preparation. This is where we lay the groundwork.
So, get this. A healthy watermelon plant can develop this massive root system that stretches up to 120 centimeters deep. It draws nutrients and moisture from up to 10 cubic meters of surrounding soil. That is just staggering. To support that kind of monster growth, you need to follow a crucial rule. Never ever plant watermelons in the exact same spot where other gourds, like pumpkins or squash, recently grew. Why? Because you want to avoid these specialized soil pathogens that build up in the dirt and attack the melon's root system. Instead, you want to plant them in soil where things like alfalfa, wheat, or legumes were previously planted. Oh, and they absolutely love well-aerated sandy loam soils with a slightly acidic to neutral pH, usually right around 6.0 to 6.5.
Prepping your soil properly can literally increase your final yield by up to 30%. So, while professional farmers typically do a deep plow in the autumn, we're talking 30 to 37 centimeters down, and mix in organic manure, home gardeners can easily emulate this. Just deeply turn your garden beds and mix in some really rich compost at the end of the previous season. Then, when spring rolls around, you just cultivate and harrow, basically loosen up that top layer of soil and add a bit of final nitrogen fertilizer right before sowing to really kickstart those giant leaves.
All right, Section 3, Seed Treatment and Seedlings. Let's talk about giving those plants a massive head start.
Okay, before those seeds go anywhere near the ground, we have to prepare them. Please don't just rip open a seed packet and toss them into the soil. We want to give your seeds an armored shield against early diseases. To do this, you'll mix a 30% perhydrol solution with water at a 1:10 ratio. That's essentially a concentrated hydrogen peroxide solution. You want to soak your watermelon seeds in this mix for exactly 120 minutes. This 2-hour soak completely strips away any potential fungal or bacterial hitchhikers. After a really thorough rinse with clean water and a good drying session, your seeds are clean, primed, and safely ready to germinate.
Now, if you're a bit impatient, or maybe you just live in a much colder region, utilizing seedlings instead of direct sowing is a totally fantastic strategy. Direct sowing means waiting around from mid-April or May for the soil to naturally reach that magic 15-degree mark. But by starting your seeds indoors in little pots during March, you bypass that cold spring soil entirely. Sure, they take about 40 to 70 days in pots, but when you finally transplant them outside, you are already weeks ahead of the game. It saves you almost 3 full weeks of growing time, which is a total lifesaver if your local summers are on the shorter side.
Okay, here is another genuinely brilliant technique: grafting. This is where you literally attach a watermelon plant onto a hardy bottle-gourd rootstock. I know, it sounds a little bit like mad science, right? But it's actually a super common agricultural practice. A standard natural watermelon root system is highly susceptible to soil conditions, but that bottle-gourd root, it is incredibly tough. It powers right through poor soil and pulls up massive amounts of nutrients, which drastically boosts the plant's resilience. The result? A much stronger vine and an even sweeter fruit on the surface.
Which brings us to Section 4, Sowing Techniques. It is time to engineer the perfect patch.
Since these plants tend to sprawl out really aggressively, figuring out your spacing and depth is kind of your next major mathematical challenge. To protect yourself against all that completely unpredictable spring weather, there's this brilliant technique called tiered sowing. Here's how it works. In a single nesting hole, you place half your seeds about 8 centimeters deep and the other half shallower, at about 4 to 5 centimeters deep. Think about it. If you plant them all shallow and a sudden drought hits, they dry out. But if you plant them all deep and heavy rains bring a sudden cold snap, they rot. By spatially separating them in the same hole, you essentially guarantee that at least half of your seeds are going to survive and thrive, completely regardless of whatever spring weather anomalies nature throws at you. It's the ultimate insurance policy.
And when it comes to actual spacing in the garden, your specific setup really matters. If you're doing an intensive setup with a great drip irrigation system giving the plants constant moisture and nutrients, you can pack them closer together, say half a meter to 0.75 meters apart internally, which gets you around 660 to 1,000 plants per decar. A standard setup stretches that out to about 0.8 to a full meter. But if you are doing an extensive setup with zero watering, just relying purely on nature, you really need to give them plenty of room. We're talking at least 1.5 meters apart internally, so those plants aren't fiercely fighting each other for moisture. Finally, let's tackle Section 5, Irrigation for Sweet Fruits. This is the big one, folks, the actual secret to maximum sweetness.
Watermelons obviously need a ton of water, but exactly when and how you deliver that moisture is literally the ultimate deciding factor for their flavor. During early growth, you want to maintain about 75 to 80% soil moisture. They're incredibly thirsty during flowering and fruit setting. You want to water deeply, but less frequently, and ideally in the morning. Drip irrigation is an absolute game changer here for precise water and fertilizer delivery, and it keeps the leaves dry so you avoid disease. But listen closely, because the absolute golden rule of watering comes right at the very end of the cycle. You actually have to stop watering when the fruits begin to ripen.
Let me emphasize this because this is the single biggest trap beginners fall into. If a watermelon is watered too much during its ripening period, its sugar content actually decreases. It physically dilutes the natural sugars. If you keep watering them all the way to harvest, you will end up with these giant, beautiful, but completely, utterly tasteless watermelons. As the fruit reaches mature size and starts to ripen, you have to back off. Depriving them just a bit at this late stage forces the plant to concentrate all those natural sugars into the fruit, which is exactly what gives you that intensely sweet, crisp flavor you're after.
Now, just a quick disclaimer, because nature is always a little unpredictable, please make sure to consult local agricultural experts and resources for your specific area. Soil types, weather patterns, and specific planting dates vary wildly by region. What works flawlessly in a hot southern climate in April might be a disaster in a northern region until late May, so definitely verify those temperature benchmarks with a local expert. So, are you ready to use the magic of tiered sowing and late-stage water restriction to grow your sweetest watermelon crop yet? Thank you so much for joining this explainer. You are officially armed with the actual agricultural science you need to harvest some truly incredible watermelons this summer. But it really does make you wonder, right? Now that you know how a simple, counterintuitive shift in watering can completely transform a fruit's flavor, what other fruits in your garden might you have been accidentally watering entirely wrong this whole time? Think about it. Happy planting, everyone, and we will see you next time.